Hi, welcome back to our Sustainable Futures career conversations, in which I talk to a number of leading professionals in the world of sustainability. Delighted today to have Amelia Woodley with me. Amelia, do you want just to introduce yourself?
My name's Amelia Woodley. I am the ESG Director for Speedy Hire. And for those that don't know Speedy Hire, we are the UK's largest tool and equipment company, providing all tools and equipment to large infrastructure and construction projects all around the UK. I sit on their executive board, and my responsibility is to lead their entire environmental and social sustainability and governance programme.
Lovely, thank you. Well, we'll dig into the role and what it entails and the challenges and opportunities you're seeing a little later. I want to start at the beginning and sort of think about that early career. You had an interesting sort of entry point into the world of environment as it was, sustainability as it's become. So just talk to me about your sort of early career.
Yeah, moves. Of course. So I did a BSc Honours in Geography and Geology at the University of Birmingham. So always had a huge passion for the environment, hence why I went and studied those particular subjects. Came out of university, was really thinking about what I wanted my career to look like. Explored various avenues, like potentially the oil and gas sector, but again, sort of my passion was more about the environment. So I went into the contaminated land sector. It was very popular back then. So working with huge organisations, decontaminating large industrial sites. My first job was with an organisation called British Aerospace. And really interesting because we were focused on remediation of nuclear weapons and explosives facilities. So we got to go to large sort of industrial sites all around the UK, working with the Ministry of Defence, and decontaminating them and turning them into other sort of land uses like housing development. Once you're in the nuclear sector, you kind of stay because the experience and all the clearances that you go through. So I worked for the Atomic Weapons Establishment, helping them build a high explosives fabrication facility in Aldermaston, decommissioned a number of nuclear waste pits for Harwell UK AEA, and then found myself on the 2012 Olympics. And I was on the Olympics as an environmental chemist for 3 to 4 years. Really high-paced, high-pressure construction project. There was a team of chemists that were out there looking at all of the decontamination works, as you can imagine, East End of London, lots of contamination over many, many decades. And we would essentially clean up all the soils and groundwater to enable the construction teams to go in and build the Olympic facilities. The biggest brownfield project I've ever worked on in my career, and learnt so much from that. And it was quite a pinnacle point for me because whilst it was the largest brownfield project, I'd kind of tipped out of my career in the contaminated land sector at that point. Coupled with the recession, and obviously how house builders taken a temporary pause, I ended up moving across into the rail sector. Yes. I joined Network Rail as an environmental manager. I led the sustainable design and construction of the Thameslink programme, £6 billion infrastructure project, running from Bedford to Brighton through the central core of London. So worked on some really iconic stations such as Blackfriars, building the world's largest solar bridge, looking at the redevelopment of London Bridge, Borough Viaduct, Farringdon. So really exciting dynamic rail infrastructure. Did that for about a decade. Still within the rail industry, moved to South Western Railway as a head of sustainability, looking more at the train operators. So how did we create a franchise under South Western that was more sustainable for the Department of Transport and also the customers as well? COVID then hit. You see, I've had a long career. Oh, yes. COVID hit. I'd been in the rail industry for about 13 years, really fancied a different challenge and wanted, to progress in my own career development. So took the role up as ESG Director at Speedy Hire, going into the power tool sector, so kind of connected to construction. And my remit there was to just kind of start from scratch. So it was really great. So I had loads of experience, and I was able to kind of set the pace with where the organisation should be from a sustainability perspective. Was there for 2 years, and then I got moved up as the Executive Board Director for ESG. Yes. one of the first and only female sustainability directors in the hire sector, and which is huge for our profession.
Yes, it really is.
So there's a whistle-stop tour for you.
No, that's brilliant. I'm going to take you back a little bit because I'm interested in the transitions there.
Yeah.
Because it's an interesting process of moving from a sort of technical consultancy into a sort of environmental role, into a broader sustainability role is an interesting and a very strong career path. Was it planned that way? What sort of prompted? How have you found that sort of transition process between those three types of roles? If you like?
Really interesting question. So for me, I always kind of knew I wanted to go into a director style role.
Yeah.
The way that I kind of found myself moving through industries was kind of organic, but slightly planned as well. So I think for me, you know, when we had the recession and I was a very technical contaminated land consultant, I knew I needed to pivot and adapt. So I needed to become more of a generalist in environmental management. And I moved to an industry where there was lots of government investment. So from a security point of view, job-wise, I knew that rail would always have that investment for a period of time, which is why I went into that particular sector. Again, as a technical sort of expert, we're broadening out from contaminated land into lots of different subject matters like carbon reduction, social value at the time when it was very, very new, and environmental management systems were quite big back then. Where I had the real pivot was in my tenure at Network Rail, sort of environment manager level, wanting to get to that head of sustainability role. You know, and had the same career challenges that most people have had in their life, where you want to progress, but you're kind of always in the second place. You're not quite getting the job. And the kind of light bulb moment for me was I met an amazing mentor when I was working at Network Rail. I ended up on a conflict resolution training course where they were looking for people to train as conflict mediators. And I thought actually that I might learn some good skill sets there. And I met one of the trainers who brought me on a journey of self-development around having better people skills. And that looked really at, you know, emotional intelligence, my own emotional awareness of other situations and other relationships at work. And when we break it down, you know, organisations are run by people and people are driven by emotions. Yes. So if you're going to be successful in a career and you're going to be successful either technically to get the outcomes you need or move yourself through that corporate ladder up into different positions, you've really got to be able to navigate and understand people. So I went through a whole coaching journey for several years where whilst I'd kind of got to the sort of pinnacle of my technical ability, there was a whole space that I hadn't unlocked around how could I interact better with people, have better relationships, to make, you know, projects more successful, but also to help me be more successful in my career. Sitting as an executive board director, most of what I do is around people, relationships, influencing, negotiating. And that's not something that you learn when you go through university. It's not something really that you probably focus on when you're early in your career. It's all around, you know, how many CDP points can I get? How many training courses can I go on? But I really wouldn't underestimate the power of understanding yourself and other people in that journey.
And you've talked about that being promoted by a mentor. Have you found that a difficult process to go through? Just sort of that self-awareness is not always something that's comfortable. Is that something you've sort of worked through?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, you know, when you're on that journey, you have to find somebody that you connect with. Because the mentor or the coach is only as good as that person and the relationship you have with them. And I've had many mentors over my years, and I've reached out to them. So it's people I've found because I've thought, you know, there's something there that I think, you know, would be beneficial for my journey. It is a hard process, right? Because you have to turn the mirror on yourself. You have to become very self-aware of, you know, not just what your strengths are, but what your weaknesses are. You start to realise, oh, maybe that's why I didn't get that promotion, or maybe that's why that conversation didn't land very well at work. And it can be quite, whilst a painful process to go through, it's actually very enlightening because suddenly you can see, you know, I have a richer and deeper understanding of myself. So I know why I might behave in a certain way. And in understanding that, I know how to navigate situations, dial certain parts of my personality traits down or dial certain parts of it up depending on the situation that I'm in or the people that I'm around. So, whilst at the start it was a bit, this is uncomfortable, I think you have to get really comfortable with that discomfort to be successful.
Absolutely. And the moves seem fairly seamless. Looking backwards, I suspect they weren't at the time. And are there sort of lessons that you've learned about that process of when's the right time to move, what to move to? Is there anything that you've sort of picked up in that journey?
Yeah, so, it's kind of, for me, it always felt it was a bit more bumpy. And I completely understand why it would look quite linear and seamless in that, from engineer to executive. They were planned moves in points. Okay. Did I think a recession was going to hit and my industry dry up? No. But it made me realise that you have to be adaptable to change. And I had to be really smart. So it made me think about, okay, well, where should I invest in terms of, right, it's better to be a generalist, because if I'm a generalist, I'm more marketable to other organisations. What's the industry that's going to be invested in? Government-backed rail schemes, that's a safe place to be. And, you look at the sustainability world now, we've gone from being generalists, or what I would call myself a jack of all trades, to then the market wanting real specialists. Yeah. So I think, when you're looking at your career, you've got to navigate not just what you're interested in, but what are the ebbs and flows, and what is the market doing, where's it moving to, because there's always going to be recessions, there's always going to be ups and downs in the economy, and you've got to be aware of where you're going to make your next move. So that's why in the kind of the chaos, a little bit of, where do I move to? I had to pivot from being a specialist to a generalist, being on construction to a rail site, rail infrastructure, which is hugely regulated, to working in a power tool company. So there was chaos in the midst of it, but because I was very strategic about how I planned those moves, that's why it looks like it's probably a bit more of a straight sort of line.
It's a good lesson to learn, I think. I'm going to focus a little bit more about the sort of sustainability within Hire Power Tools company and where you see the sort of challenges that you've got, the opportunities that are there within your business now. So just talk to me about how sustainability lands in Speedy.
Yeah, of course. So the hire sector is a really interesting business for me. So, when I joined Speedy, I didn't know anything about power tools at all, and I'm still on my learning journey with that. But it presented the opportunity to take an industry that is perceived to be fossil fuel heavy, not very inclusive. It is predominantly male, British and white. It's a bit similar to construction, and really pivot that organisation. And industry in a wider sense. So how could we take Speedy and how could we make it clean tech, innovative, sustainable, inclusive, attractive for people to work in? Because I think, particularly for young people coming through their careers, you might not naturally wake up and say, I want to work in power tools. Some might, but, it's probably not going to be a company you think, yes, Speedy Hire, whereas, you might think of Google or a Lego. But actually what we do as an organisation is we play a really important part in the decarbonisation of UK cities and infrastructure. So with construction being 40% of carbon emissions, the role that we play in power tools is by decarbonising those power tools and that equipment, we're helping not just to decarbonise construction and all those major construction companies on behalf of the government, but we are building sustainable, clean infrastructure in cities of the future. Now, that's an exciting company that I'd want to work for. So part of that journey was not just to focus on the clean tech and the eco products and doing some community initiatives. It was about how could we pivot that business. How could we make it more attractive to customers so we grow our revenue line through the investment in clean tech? how could we make it more attractive to investors by showing them that we were managing our risks and we were adapting to climate change, so that we sought better investment from sustainable investors as well. And our investor portfolio is shifting because of our ESG performance. But also, how could we attract people to the hire sector? And we know that construction has a skills shortage. We know that we need a lot of young people in there, but equally, we need people to stay in the sector. So the sustainability brand plays a really important part of that talent attraction and retention as well. So when I looked at Speedy, I thought, there's real scope here to change the image of the hire sector.
Absolutely. And you've got some really interesting examples of that, haven't you, with things like the generators and areas that you've really taken the fossil fuel out of the equation.
Yeah.
You've got some examples of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So our organisation was predominantly fossil fuel based, so, petrol, diesel products. We've gone on a really big investment journey around clean tech. So we've brought out the world's first articulated hydrogen lift boom with Nifty Lift. We've got into a joint venture with AFC Energy on hydrogen generation, so removing those diesel generators from site. We've acquired an organisation called Green Power Hire, which is, again, battery generation, so getting those big, dirty diesel generators off those construction sites, which costs a huge amount of money and emits a huge amount of carbon. And we've done a lot of work around solar as well. So if you think about construction, particularly in the winter months, you need a lot of lighting. So we no longer invest in anything but clean solar technology. We've moved our asset base to over 50% eco products in the last few years, which is massive. And over half of our revenue is now coming from eco products. So we know that the market is signalling to us that customers want these sustainable solutions, and that's very attractive to our investors as well. So massive work around clean tech. We've also been the first in UK hire to commit and have validated our science-based targets. We spent 16 months modelling our net zero transition journey, and we've brought in electric vehicles to our commercial fleet. So the first electric HGV. We've brought in over 150 electric transit vans, and we're phasing out that diesel, petrol, commercial vehicles. We also have no fossil fuel company cars in our business as of this year, because we've done a huge amount of work around hybrid cars for our employees as well. On our property front, we've had huge gains on that. So our Milton Keynes Innovation Centre is our first net zero building. It's an EPC A+ rated. We put a lot of investment on energy efficient technology such as LED lighting, smart bays, a building management system, solar PV. And we've taken the learning from Milton Keynes and replicated that across our estate. So now at Speedy, we've generated between 50 and 75% energy reduction from building management systems. 94% of our electricity is renewable. We're rolling out more solar PVs across our estate. So we've had a kind of a real sort of shift change around what our property estate looks like, because not just from a carbon perspective, but people want to work in nice buildings and they want to work in comfortable buildings. And what we found through that journey was, as we moved from kind of your older property estates into these newer sustainable centres, people were saying they were happier at work, they were getting on better with their employees, they enjoyed being there. So we see the well-being benefit of that investment. And that's been a real journey for us. Initially a lot of our focus was around the environment side. Now what we've moved on to is more the social value. So work around apprenticeships and graduates, supporting hidden talent in the community, so those underrepresented groups. So ex-offenders, people, ex-armed forces, modern slavery victims, supporting our employees through a green skills transition. So as we move to be a net zero sustainable business, we've got to bring a whole plethora of people on that sustainability journey with us, down to your traditional kind of community investment charity projects as well. So last year, through our our partnerships with our charity organisations, through the work we do with local businesses in the supply chain, we generated £29 million in social value. So some really exciting
So you're making that bit of a point of
projects.
difference as well, aren't you? So it becomes a positive for the business as well.
Absolutely. And you know, for us to be a commercially successful business, we need to be sustainable, because we know those customers are wanting to work with organisations that have sustainability at the heart of the business. We know that investors want to invest in those companies, and we know that people want to work for them as well. So it's a real kind of attraction point for various stakeholders.
Certainly. Let's do a bit of crystal ball gazing and look ahead in terms of what the big challenges facing the sustainability space is. It's going through that sort of periodic phase where money is a little bit tighter than it was, so things are being scrutinised a bit more. I'm interested in getting your thoughts about where the value is going to come looking forward and the future of sustainability.
Yeah. Well, you know, look, I think whenever there's an economic downturn or a recession, sustainability is always the one that either gets hit or slowed down. What I will say is, over my 20-year career, I think this is the first time I've not really seen that. Previously, it would be kind of, oh, let's stop. We can't afford to invest in it. Now what's happening is, well, we've got to continue, because the pressure is there, and the pressure is there from the financial sector and from customers. But you're having to get smarter with what you've got. So for us, what we really look at is we invest in things that are commercially sustainable. So they have to be commercially successful to us. We look at things through a deeper lens. So not just looking at the financial return on investment, what are the other returns on investment that's going to come from the sustainability agenda? Yeah. And then you look at your people. So, you know, you can't grow big sustainability teams in tough economic times. They are generally quite lean teams anyway. So what you do is you do more with what you've got, and you really focus on the upskilling and training of others in the organisation to come on that journey, because I don't see it slowing down. So I think in that current situation where you don't have the ability to invest a lot, there are other ways that you can generate that return. And that's what we're focusing on. How can we get the maximum return that's not going to either require huge amounts of investment that's unsustainable, or essentially eat away at our profit line?
Fantastic. We're sort of coming towards an end, and one of the things I wanted to talk about, which we haven't had a chance to yet, is that sort of how you develop that career, and you've done a lot of work in terms of that outside of the work environment as well, doing that pro bono type work, and I'm keen to just sort of get your thoughts about how that fits into developing your skills and networks and developing opportunities within the sort of wider world.
Well, I think, you know, we've talked about it before. I don't think you ever stop learning and you never stop growing, even if you do get a point in your career and you're metaphorically at the top table, it kind of doesn't end there. And what I found through my career is, you know, looking for a job is highly competitive, right? You know, we have to be really open and honest about that. So what edge do I have above another candidate? And that really came through my pro bono work. So, you know, taking the time to volunteer with other organisations, to support causes that were really important to me, because I think you have to have purpose and passion in that, but also things that were going to help you build your skills, skills that you may need to finesse, or skills that you may realise that you don't have. So, you know, even now as an executive board director, I still do pro bono work with other organisations. So I'm a director of Bright Future, which is a modern slavery charity. That gives me experience in a different sector, in a different board, where I can cross-fertilise ideas. I'm also a trustee of the Scouts. So again, you know, completely different sector, completely different makeup of board. And what it does, it enables you to be more diverse. So when you're in that process of, you know, applying for jobs or moving through your career, you've got an edge to you. And it also shows a passion, I think. Yeah. You know, a lot of being in sustainability, you've got to be passionate about it, because you have to ride some really tough times out. You know, sometimes you're not the favourite team, and you know, it's only been recent years where sustainability has been the cool kid of the business. So you've really had to, you know, show that you're passionate about it and you care. But one of the things that I did learn, which I probably really learned quite late, was the power of a network. So, you know, I think when you're young, you can be quite nervous about going to networking, and you know, you tend to focus more on maybe your CDP development, or in my case, there was safeness in being a technical expert. But the networks are so important, not just for your own development, but for forging business relationships, or creating new deals with customers. A lot of the innovation that I brought into organisations and the innovation I brought into Speedy has been through those networks and relationships that I built through, you know, going to that drinks event, or going and sitting in that panel and speaking to the, you know, the speaker after. So, you know, my advice to anybody is don't pigeon yourself in just having a job. Do stuff outside of your main career that enriches you. Yeah. And meet people.
Push yourself out of the comfort zone a little bit.
Because you'll never know where you'll end up or who you might meet.
Yes.
And you can get involved in some really exciting projects that way.
It's fantastic advice. I think a good point to finish. Thank you, Amelia. That's been fascinating. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. A really interesting career.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lovely.